What's up, everybody? My name is Jacob Hardison, and today I'm going to teach you how to build a 4-shoe clutch. Welcome back, everybody, to, of course, the lovely Adrenaline RC YouTube channel, where today, as you saw in the intro, I'm going to teach you how to build a 4-shoe clutch. I do apologize up front for missing last week's video. I was unfortunately a bit under the weather, and it probably would not have been very fun listening to my disgusting voice. But here we are back this week with a fresh video, and in honor of going into the warmer months of the year, figured we would start a little bit of Nitro content. There'll be a few more of these videos, of course, to come in the future, but we'll start out with the clutch end of things. And the clutch, of course, is going to be very important because that is what is going to be effectively driving the vehicle. And if it's not built properly or shimmed properly, it can definitely cause some major issues around the track and cause you to flame out. So in front of me, I have my lovely Ultimate Racing Dakota Fend engine. Got a little mixed up there. Had a little brain fart for a sec, but nonetheless, over here, I've got the couple of tools we're going to need. And then, of course, I've got all of our clutch bits and pieces over here that we'll be using today. For today's video, I will be using a ProTek 4-shoe clutch, but the build for the ProTek, Team Associated, the TLR and Tekno ones will be the same build. There'll be a slightly different style, but generally every 4-shoe clutch is going to follow this same build procedure. It might vary ever so slightly from one to the other, though. So without further ado, let's go ahead and show you the materials that are in front of me up close. You get a list of what you need, and we'll show you how to build a clutch. The materials you'll need to build your 4-shoe clutch will be all of your 4-shoe clutch bits and pieces, that being your clutch bell, flywheel nut, cullet, some shims, our bearings, the shoes, some springs, specifically clutch springs, the pins for the shoes, and then your actual mounting screw for holding everything onto the crankshaft of the next thing you'll need, which will be, of course, the engine. Tool-wise, we'll need a hand driver with a 2mm and a 2.5. This can vary slightly from clutch to clutch. We will need a large pair of channel locks, and then our actual nut driver, which will be able to tighten our clutch nut, all of which can be found at adrenalinrcracing.com. Alrighty, so here we are with everything out in front of us, and of course our lovely engine. I did go ahead and lay down a microfiber just so that way things like our little pins don't roll away, and then of course that way I don't scratch either my board or the top of my engine with, well, the engine while I'm doing all of this. So we can go ahead and get started. Now, one thing I'll give you a heads up on, this isn't the exact cullet that comes with this ProTek clutch, but it is the one that I have, and it is going to function for today's video. So anybody who has the ProTek kit, don't yell at me for having a gold cullet. But nonetheless, first thing we're gonna do is slide our cullet onto the engine. Slide it as far back as we can. Make sure our crankshaft is pulled forward and that it's seated all the way back. Next thing we're gonna go ahead and do is take our lovely flywheel, and we can go ahead and set it down to the back of the engine, take our nut. And one thing I'll actually show you, on this particular clutch, the springs will sit into this little indent. Some clutches will do that, some clutches won't, but in case you are wondering, that is what that little groove is for. So we'll go ahead, thread on our nut all the way to the back. Use our nut driver. Go ahead, crank it all the way on there. And then this is where we will take our channel locks for the first time. Now, if you want to keep your flywheel nice and pretty, you can put like a rag or something in here, or there are some channel locks that actually have rubber grips in there. But in this case, because I just want it to be tight, and I'm not too worried about the looks of things, I'm just going to grab it very nicely with my channel locks there. And then using my nut wrench, we can go ahead and tighten this all the way down. This is something that you are going to want to get as tight as you can, just so that way, of course, you don't have this fly off during a long 30-minute, 45-minute main. That would not be very cash money. But once we get it tight, we can go ahead and release our channel locks and move to our next step. Now, the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and mount springs. So what you'll notice, I'll grab my driver here to use as a pointer. There are little holes around the flywheel. That is where the springs are going to sit in. So we're going to we'll start with our carbon shoe here. Take our spring. Now in this case, I'm going to do 0.95s with my carbon shoes, and I'm going to do 1s with my aluminum shoes. That is a very common standard setup. Of course, for learning how to put the clutch together, that isn't super duper necessary, but that is a very common starting setup that is going to be very smooth to drive around the track. So we're going to take our lovely spring here, and you'll see in our shoe, we have a very similar little hole there. We're going to take the long portion, we're going to slide it into that hole with the short sticking out towards the inside, if you can see that there. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this, and this short part is going to key into that hole in the flywheel. And then what you want to do is line up this front hole all the way down through our shoe and our spring, because that is where our pin is going to sit. So we'll grab our first pin and then just kind of wiggle it around until it then seats all the way in, and it's going to be holding our shoe in place. After you do that, you can take your 2 mil or whatever size it happens to be for your particular clutch if you're not using this one, and we're just going to go ahead and tighten it in. And you'll repeat this process all the way around, and I'll alternate my shoes. So I'll go carbon, aluminum, carbon, aluminum. So we'll rotate the engine to our next portion. We'll grab our aluminum with our 1.0 spring, put the long part into the actual clutch shoe with the short part sticking out towards the inside, as you can see there. Just like before, we're gonna key the spring into that hole on the flywheel. While we're holding that, we'll reach around, line up our pinhole, do some wiggling. Sometimes it also is easier to actually just grab the driver, wiggle it around a little bit, and then it kind of just keys itself into place. We'll get it keyed into the very base of the flywheel, just like that. So where now our threads are touching the flywheel, and we will go ahead and tighten it up. So you'll repeat that process all the way around, and then once you have that done, then we will go ahead and mount our clutch bell. To speed things up, I'm just going to mount my other two, and then we can show you how to shim and mount your clutch bell. Alrighty, so here we are back with the clutch fully assembled on our engine. So now we are ready to get our clutch bell on. So the first thing we're gonna do is take our bearings. These guys are gonna be just metal shielded ProTek bearings. Nothing special at all, but I've had good luck with them. I haven't had any issues out of them, and they're relatively inexpensive, which is nice, because Nitro, as we know, is already very expensive. So the first thing we're gonna go ahead and do is we'll slide one bearing into our clutch bell. We'll leave the backside open because we're gonna put the other one just straight onto the crank. And what we're gonna do is just get an idea of how much shimming we actually need. So when you're setting all of this up, you don't want your flywheel and clutch bell to move together. You want them to move independently from one another, because if you hit your brakes and you stop your clutch bell, and then that stops your flywheel, then you flame out, and then you don't get to have any fun, and that's, well, not fun. So we're gonna take our flywheel and our clutch bell, push the clutch bell back towards the flywheel, and you can see they move together, which is not what we want. That means that this is gonna be too tight. So we can go ahead and pull our clutch bell off, take one of our shims, slide it on, and then we can put our clutch bell back on. And we'll do this one shim at a time. So we'll go ahead and push back, and you can see that we aren't getting much movement, but we get a little bit of movement. You can kind of hear it. Well, I can hear it. I don't know if the mic is picking it up, but you can hear that there's a little bit of metal on metal when I'm pushing this back. So we'll slide this back out once again. We'll take another one of our shims, slide it on, and then we can do our test once again, and you can see that we have no movement together. They are totally independent of one another. So that's how you know that you have properly set your gap from flywheel to your clutch bell. Now what you're gonna do is take your screw, put it in the end, and then we're just gonna tighten this all the way down. Now, one thing I will give you a heads up on, as you guys saw earlier, I told you I'm not using the ProTek collet. The ProTek collet is a little bit thicker, so that spaces this out a touch more. So I'm actually using a collet that's too thin. So you'll notice that I have a lot of gap here. When you buy this clutch kit, that's not actually gonna be the case, but it is in mine. So what you'll do is you'll mount the screw on, you'll see what that gap is, and then from there, you'll decide if you need to add any shims on the outside. But you are always gonna wanna have a gap, because if you put too many shims out here, tighten your screw all the way down, again, this is gonna lock all together as one. Hit the brakes, you flame out, no fun. So because I know I'm not using the right collet, I'm gonna need a lot of shims out here, but I'll get those all added on. That way you can see what the proper gap is supposed to look like. So I already know that I'm gonna need like 4 of these. So we'll put all those onto the end, start threading our screw. We'll tilt the engine slightly up, that way the shims don't fall off while you're tightening it. And then this should be a pretty appropriate gap. Now, obviously you can't feel it, you can only see it from the video, but you do want a little bit of a gap in here, and you want to leave a big enough gap to where when everything heats up and expands, it doesn't, again, lock everything together. So you want to have a pretty good amount of gap front to back. Now, over time, also, as you run it, yes, it will expand under heat and under the load, but over the course of a few runs on it, this will start to loosen up because everything is getting worn in. So you may have to revisit this potentially at some point. But a lot of times, once you set it when it's brand new, you won't have to reset it again until you go put a new set of shoes or bearings in it. And even then, a lot of times, the shimming is gonna be the exact same from one to the other. So it's a relatively straightforward process, nothing super crazy at all. Obviously, we don't need a ton of tools, but this is how you properly set up your clutch and your clutch bell, so that way you have the most success on the track. So again, when you're doing this shimming here, you'll start with no shims, push the clutch bell back, you'll rotate it, and then you'll add shims until these two move independently. Then you'll put your screw all the way into the crank just by hand. We're not doing any final cranks. And then we'll see if we need any shims on the outside. As we saw in my case, I had to add quite a few because I had the incorrect collet, and you're looking for a gap about that size if the video gives a good enough reference. But nonetheless, just something that has a nice gap, and then you get a nice free spin on your clutch bell. So I hope this has been helpful for you. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to leave those down below. I plan on bringing you some more Nitro content in the future. This, of course, just being the start of that. One last thing I'll go over. Once you hit this point, if you are happy with your shimming, you'll grab your flywheel once again, and then you'll just crank this screw down until it's all the way tight. When it's as tight as you can get it, pull everything out, double check your spacing, make sure everything spins free, and then you are all set to go to then get your pipe installed, get it mounted in the car, and go ripping around the track. So we'll say the outro one more time. If you have any more questions or comments or requests, leave those down below. I'll get back to you as efficiently as I can. And of course, we'll see you next week for an all new video.